Well, let's go ahead and get to it. Welcome, BLG, back to Philly Pressbox Radio. Brandon, I'm not one to get really excited about the draft. You don't win championships in April, but I'm pretty fired up about what went down last weekend.
You should be. Eagles fans everywhere should be really excited about what this team was able to do. I think this offseason prior to the draft lacked some real juice. I mean, they signed Hassan Reddick. That's a nice ad, but that alone doesn't really necessarily move the needle for the team. And I think getting A.J. Brown, which was that really on anyone's radar in a big way? I don't think so. And then Jordan Davis, who I think has the potential to be a difference maker for this defense and an interesting special player for a long time. And to get Nakobe Dean, like to do all of this, it's a really good weekend for the Eagles.
Well, let's break that down a little bit. Let's talk about what happened on Thursday, first of all, which was draft night number 1. The Eagles getting Jordan Davis after moving up a couple of spots to do that, and then the big trade for A.J. Brown. There are some concerns about how much Jordan Davis is going to play, at least as a rookie, that he's only a two-down guy or 38% of the snaps or whatever. How do you like the move to get Jordan Davis?
I think the red flags against Jordan Davis, they're not coming out of nowhere. I hear them, but I think kind of like with Devontae Smith, where everyone was just so focused on his size. I think you're kind of, if you're looking at all of those things, the reasons not to like him, I think you're missing some really good reasons to like him. And I think some of the concerns are overblown to the extent of where, okay, he didn't have the best sack production, but who did at Georgia? Because they don't really play an attack style defense as much as they're a 2-gapping system and they want to control the line of scrimmage. So I think that's a very valid reason why his sack numbers weren't bigger. Also, he didn't play the most snaps in part because they wanted to keep that rotation heavy because they had a lot of talented players, and because Kirby Smart wanted to play the guys, the recruits, the guys who are up and coming. So they're not transferring to other schools. So there was a lot of moving parts, I think, in the picture there. At the end of the day, you're getting the Chuck Bednarik Award winner for the best defender in college football from the national championship team. Oh, who, by the way, also happens to literally be the second most athletic prospect ever in the NFL draft. So that's pretty crazy. I think you take a chance on that guy. Obviously, the Eagles value the trenches. There's a lot of sense in that. Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, both currently set to be free agents after this year. You need a new foundational piece in the interior there, and I think Jordan Davis has the potential to be special. I don't think there's a Jordan Davis in just any draft. And you look at the players like him in terms of difference makers for championship-winning teams, Haloti Ngata, Vince Wilfork, Casey Hampton, Vita Vea more recently. Like, these guys can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought after the pick and, all the hype and all that, there was that picture that came out, a still picture of him being triple teamed by 3 Alabama linemen. That tells you something in its own self. But I think the Davis pickup to me is fantastic, and it creates a nice rotation for the Eagles as well in the middle while Davis is getting his feet wet and Cox is there to mentor him. We know Cox isn't going to be around forever. I think it's a great situation, and I think it's a great piece to go with Reddick. And then, as we'll get to Dean later on, they really strengthened the front seven.
Absolutely. And I think Jordan Davis helps you. Maybe he's not, posting the biggest sack numbers himself, but I think he's helping his teammates do that. And he's also getting you to 3rd and longs because he's going to be such a force in the interior there, stopping the run. And I just don't buy that he doesn't have it as a pass rusher. When he was allowed to attack upfield, I've seen him do some pretty special things in terms of blowing through a running back who's trying to chip him and no chance, a running back trying to block him and then getting to the quarterback. So I definitely think, again, the upside alone to me is worth it. A lot of times we think of players as, high floor or low ceiling, or just the opposite, low ceiling, high floor. I think Jordan Davis is a rare high floor, high ceiling prospect.
All right, and then the A.J. Brown deal, they had to give up some picks. They had to pay out some money. Wide receivers are getting paid these days. But you like A.J. Brown, is that correct?
I do a lot. I think people should like him because you look at his efficiency metrics. You can't just look at the volume numbers because you have to consider the Titans are running the ball more than almost any other team, especially like through the presence of Derrick Henry there. So, he didn't have 1,000-yard receiving season last year. He missed a couple games. Not majorly worried with injuries, knock on wood, because it's not like he's had, these serious issues thus far. He's only 24. Like, that's pretty crazy. He'll be 25 this season, but to trade for a guy like that who's a proven producer, again, you look at efficiency metrics such as yards per route run. He's ranking like top 5 the past couple seasons. I think he was 5th last year, second in 2020, and then as a rookie, he was like 13th. So this guy has been incredibly efficient. He is one of the best receivers in the NFL. The contract is absolutely reasonable when you're considering the market rate for these guys, and to get a guy that young to get his entire prime, basically, like, that's a really good deal. And just what the Eagles needed. They needed receiver. Like, who did they have if they didn't have AJ Brown? It's Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, and then you're looking at Zach Pascal as your number 3. Like, that's not ideal. That's really not a situation you feel great about going to war with, especially looking at some of these other teams, what they have to offer. So to get AJ Brown is absolutely a game changer.
Hey, Brandon, a quick follow-up. He and Jalen Hurts are very good friends. We learned that in recent weeks. Is that something that's going to help them with the relationship on the field as well, do you think?
I don't think it hurts. No pun intended. I think the fact that Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown have a relationship, and AJ Brown being on this team, I think it's more than 0%. I'd say it's way less than 100% in terms of being all meaningful. And I think there's a pretty decent chance that AJ Brown outlasts Jalen Hurts on this team. But the fact that they have this camaraderie certainly doesn't. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I love this. I think this trade is fantastic. It's an upper echelon young receiver. I think they were probably going to have to draft a receiver at some point, whether they'd have done it here in the first round or early in the second round. But we've seen how that's worked out recently. Not so good. There's no reaching for this guy. You swapped first and you traded a 3rd-round pick for a Pro Bowler. Great move by Howie Roseman, and him and Smith and Watkins on the field together, they've got weapons.
Absolutely. And when you bump down Zach Pascal to, let's say, the 5th option in this offense, and you bump Quez Watkins down to being like the 3rd receiver, that's good. That's where those guys should be. I think those are, nice players for their role, but when you put them in a really bigger role, then that's not as ideal. And Devontae Smith, I thought, was really good last year. I think his numbers suffered. Speaking of AJ Brown's volume numbers suffering from being in a run-heavy offense, the Eagles ran the ball more than any other team last year. So I think for Devontae to hopefully get some more volume this year, and you had AJ Brown taking away attention from Devontae and vice versa, really, I just think that's a formidable thing to have. And just the style of football that AJ Brown plays, I think, is very much going to lend itself to Philly in terms of a guy who's going to fight for yards after the catch. He's physical. He's big. We all love T.O. when he was in his prime here. We like a big receiver like that, and I think he's absolutely going to be that new presence here.
So, Brandon, as recently as about 10 days ago, Nakobe Dean was seen as a mid-first round pick by a lot of people. Didn't happen, and he kept dropping and dropping. So Eagles fans thought, maybe we'll get him in the 2nd round. They went in a different direction there. And then the 3rd round rolls around, and you think, hey, maybe Nakobe Dean now for the Eagles. Let's talk about Nakobe Dean. Are there concerns about, the injuries that he's had? And if they're not that serious, is this a steal like most people think?
I mean, I think it's no matter what, basically, even if he I don't want to say never plays a snap, but even kind of realistic worst case scenario, the risk is worth it, at pick 83, I believe. But it is a little weird. You can't just say the Eagles outsmarted everyone else and there was nothing here and there was no reason why teams were passing on him. That's a little naive to think. There's clearly something. Now, maybe was it a good reason? Maybe it wasn't. And maybe teams will look foolish indeed for passing up on him like that. But clearly something went into him falling that far. And even looking at what New York Giants general manager Joe Shane had to say when he was asked about kind of why didn't the Giants take a risk on Nakobe Dean? And he basically said something to the effect of well, there's a reason and I don't really want to get into that. So okay, kind of monitor that. And at the same time, it's kind of hard to pair that with also Howie Roseman and Nakobe Dean both saying he'll be fine for rookie minicamp coming up this weekend. So I guess we'll see if that's true, and we'll see how that goes. And it's something certainly we'll be monitoring through OTAs and training camp. Is he out there on the field every day? Is he able to stay healthy? It's something that we're going to need to see, I think, fully before we can just merely assume there are no issues here whatsoever. And obviously how he holds up through the course of a season too, assuming he's playing. So I can't just put all those concerns to bed just yet until we kind of really see it, him prove he's able to be durable and be out there on the field like he was at Georgia. But still, just for him to fall that far, there's something there. But for the Eagles' sake, hopefully it isn't anything.
Yeah, Brandon, I'll tell you, I'll share with you from one of my sources that said that the University of Georgia created this situation by saying he had a strain that could require surgery. Well, strains don't require surgery. Tears require surgery. And they left a lot of these teams in limbo on not knowing the real health. And that's what the drop was. Not the player. The player could play. The player was first-round pick.
Well, that's much to the Eagles' benefit then, because being able to pair Nakobe Dean with Jordan Davis is really nice. Just drafting those players from the championship team, kind of hard to go wrong. Howie did a good job with that last year, getting Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. And then you look at just what the Eagles didn't have at linebacker. I think Kaiser White is a nice one-year deal. You'll see if he can actually be a nice player for this team or not. If not, you move on. TJ Edwards, though, also on the last year of his contract, and we'll see if the Eagles really want to make him a long-term piece at some point. So in the case that both of those guys aren't around, then you have Nakobe Dean here, and that's pretty good to have.
Hey, speaking of linebackers, you mentioned the other newcomer, Hassan Reddick, the Temple alum. He is an edge rusher, but I'm hearing that he's probably going to often line up as a linebacker. Is that an indication the Eagles may be playing more 3-4 this season than in the past?
I think we're looking at a hybrid here. There were a lot of 3-4 looks in training camp last season, and then I would say even early in the season. And I think the Eagles kind of tried to get away from that a little bit because they probably didn't have all the right pieces for that, especially just, coming off of years and years of being a 4-3 defense and not, being fully equipped to run that style. I don't think it's necessarily what the Eagles want to move full on to, just like 3-4 all the time. I think they still have personnel for that 43 defense, but I think we're going to see a hybrid. And I think Jonathan Gannon has talked about that in the past too, and kind of emulating a little bit of what Brandon Staley has done. He specifically mentioned him. So I think we can kind of see both of those defenses. And yeah, you look at Jordan Davis being, a classic nose tackle in the middle there. That certainly makes sense. And Reddick, as you mentioned, adding him as a same kind of linebacker, edge rusher, and then Kyron Johnson, obviously, who they got in day 3, very much a 3-4 linebacker kind of mold. So yeah, they definitely are adding the pieces for that.
Hey, Brandon, I wanted to ask you about the 6th-round pick, Grant Calcaterra. I believe I got that right, Calcaterra. Yep. I think he's kind of an interesting guy in that he's got some major concussion issue history, but he actually retired from football, came back, got the green light, came back, played well, probably dropped to the 6th round because of the concussion issues. Is there a steal sitting there as well? Did they reach out on a guy that, if he's healthy, could turn into being something of a surprise as well?
I was watching him a little bit more, and you can really see how he made an impact in the red zone. Really good hands, size, the athleticism seemed to help him down there. And you look at his stats, didn't post the big volume numbers, but in terms of, again, efficiency, it was pretty good. He can make a big play, is what I'm trying to say. Not so many words. So it's definitely an interesting guy to take a chance on in day 3. The fact that he did already retire is a red flag, because you have to wonder, okay, what if he kind of has another concussion in training camp? And is he going to hang him up? And I don't think anyone can blame him if he did, but that's certainly something we're going to be monitoring, not only now, but for the rest of his career. So you kind of have to file that away and wonder, if that possibility is kind of why teams were scared off taking a chance on him. So, there's some downside there, but it'll be worth a look at the very least to see if he can kind of compete for that number 2 tight end role, because that's something they need behind Dallas Goedert. I think Jack Stoll did some nice things last year and deserves a chance to compete for that spot as well, but by no means should he just be handed that job. So the Eagles are adding some more competition there at tight end behind Goedert, which is exactly what they needed to do.
So, Brandon, as I put the draft class by the Eagles up again, 7 rounds, 5 picks, ultimately 0 cornerbacks, 0 safeties. Is that a concern?
when you look at the depth chart, I would say absolutely is a concern. The fact of the matter is no team is going to have a perfect roster. You're going to have holes somewhere on your team. So you have to acknowledge that. So that's part of it. But, the other part of it is you're going to war with a lot of guys with question marks and just kind of, Anthony Harris, who was fine last year. Not really excited about that. Marcus Epps, who I think is actually an intriguing player, but more so, again, kind of like I talked about with Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal on offense, like in their role, I like Marcus Epps maybe as like a third safety, a guy who can kind of rotate in and give you some snaps and different formations and different looks. I think that's worthwhile. But if you're asking him to be your second best safety, and then your best potentially, if something happens to Anthony Harris, that's just not really the ideal spot to be. I guess one thing I would say to kind of quell any panic or at least downplay some concerns about the Eagles secondary is Jonathan Gannon, for all of his faults, I think has typically gotten more out of less with his defensive backs, or at least has had success maximizing them. You look at Xavier Rhodes, who, by the way, is still out there, and potentially the Eagles could sign at some point if they really wanted to. In Indy, you look at Darius Slay having a bounce-back year last year. Avonte Maddox just had the best year of his career. So, they've gotten some production out of these cornerbacks. I really liked what Zach McPherson, the Eagles' fourth-round pick from last year, showed in training camp. So I'm interested to see if he kind of can make that leap. Maybe he can't, but I think he deserves at least a little bit of some hope, of a chance to do that. So, there's still training camp to play out. There's trade options out there. Chuck Clark from the Ravens has been mentioned, especially with the Ravens taking Kyle Hamilton and obviously signing Marcus Williams in free agency. So, I would say there's still some names that the Eagles potentially add. It's not like, it's locked in stone, the roster right now, but it's certainly an area that they need to get better at and could afford to get much better at.
Well, Brandon, we know that this class being, this draft was much different because of the COVID class. A lot more talent in this class, probably deeper, whether it was better or not, but there was a lot of talent in this class. The unsigned free or the undrafted free agents that they got, any help there? Is the Blankenship kid going to be able to help them, or any of the others on the back end?
They got some
step in and get something.
Yeah, sorry. They got some of the top-ranked undrafted rookie free agents, depending on, whose rankings you look by. I believe NFL.com had Josh Jobe, the Alabama corner, as one of their top defensive backs available. So, I think the approach there is you're kind of just taking like scratch-offs, basically lottery tickets here to see if something hits, something works out for you. And that's a reasonable approach to do, and you can't really do too much else between all of the quarterbacks they already had in terms of Zach McPherson and Mac McCain and Tay Gowan and these guys who were kind of like day 3 picks the past couple of years. Again, you're throwing that all at the wall. You're hoping something sticks. Might not. There's a good chance it won't work out, but there's some kind of hope that just based on the pure volume that one of those guys might be able to be something for you. So, it's worthwhile. It's not a sure bet by any means, but we'll see.
So the Eagles draft getting generally very good grades. I'm going to put them up right here. And that includes you at BGN Radio. Everybody going somewhere between B, B+, A-, and A, even a couple of A+. So you do think it's an A-?
Yeah, I'll go with an A- just because, ideally in a perfect world, you want more volume than 5 picks. And, I can't complain about that too much. They got A.J. Brown. You have to factor in that as well. But, in a perfect world, in an A+ world, to me, you're able to sit at 15, maybe get someone, not have to give up those picks that they gave up. So, I mean, and if you factor in next year's trade as well in terms of the first-round pick they got in 2023 with the Saints and the 2024 second, that's strong too. So, the Cam Jurgens pick knocks it down a little bit for me just from the standpoint of I don't know that that's definitely the best player available. And also, even if you would argue he is, okay, there is literally no precedent in the NFL of teams taking a center and them not really playing at all in their first year. You just don't really see examples of that. I don't necessarily think you need to take a center like that and burn a year of his rookie contract. And while some people like the Athletics' Dane Brugler were higher on a Cam Jurgens and had him as their 49th overall prospect, you look at someone like PFF or some other outlets, they had him more down by 190. So, there's obviously a difference in opinion there. And maybe grooming, I can see the vision. I get you bring him in, maybe Jason Kelce can kind of really help groom him. He takes over next year. But to me, I'm also not 100% convinced that Jason Kelce is walking away after this season. I mean, maybe it's more likely than not, but he's coming off an all-pro year. And he could potentially be the best option for the Eagles again next year. And at that point, you have Cam Jurgens, who has never played guard. So maybe he can do it, but he'd be on the lighter end as a guy at his weight for that position. And then you're burning potentially 2 years of his rookie deal. Like, that would not be very good. And it also would not be unprecedented for the Eagles, because it looked like Andre Dillard was kind of going that way in his second season before he got hurt there. So I don't think that's an A+ kind of pick for me, but at the same time, I'm kind of quibbling. Is very much more positive than bad. So it's an A- for me.
All right, let's get to the field. We're talking about on paper. Now let's get to the field. Okay, we got the offense that still has, I guess by considered many, the best offensive line in the NFL. Let's stick with that. Let's call it top 5. I'll call it top couple. You have a potential 1,000-yard receiver in A.J. Brown. You have a potential 1,000-yard receiver in Devontae Smith, and you have Miles Sanders, who can be a 1,000-yard back. We seem to think that the Eagles like to run the football first. How are you going to spread the wealth with Dallas Goedert, Quez Watkins, and so forth? And I think my own thought is they're going to set this offense up for Jalen Hurts to be very, very successful by running the ball and then being able to open the field up a little bit and not have to throw them deep balls that he has a little trouble with.
Yeah, I think the Eagles want to pass the ball, ideally more than they did, again, when they ended up as the run-heaviest team in the league. You just look at where their passing rates are historically, and they're not. That's not them. I think they had to do it clearly last year when they were trying to pass the ball a lot earlier in the year, and it clearly just wasn't working out, and they really just decided to lean into the strength of their team, which was Jeff Stoutland and the offensive line and the running game. So it's hard for me to believe, at the same time, they're fully just going to pivot away from that, because it did work so well, and a lot of that is still there for them. But I think they realize, and Nick Sirianni's kind of even talked about, they know they can't be that low in passing attempts. Like, you just have to be higher than that. You have to, especially to win, the most important games and in the playoffs and against the really good teams, you're going to have to throw the ball at some point. The run is not just always going to be there for you every single week until the Super Bowl. If it was, the Eagles would have had a better chance at winning it all last season. So they definitely want to see an evolution, I believe, from Jalen Hurts. So the pressure is on him now. Look, the tools are here for the Eagles to have a really good offense, and it's on him to step up and be a better player than he was last year. Obviously, he made some strides in 2021, but not to the point where he erased all doubt by any means, and to the point even where the Eagles were certainly flirting with Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and looking into those options in a very serious way. Obviously didn't land them and didn't work out, but they certainly were checking in there and were not fully sold on Jalen Hurts. So now is the time for him to really step up, because after this season, he's going to be eligible for a contract. And I could be wrong, but my read on this is that his camp is very much going to want that commitment as soon as after the season, because the Eagles have flirted with those quarterbacks and they have an extra first-round pick next year. And I think Jalen Hurts and his camp are going to want that security. So he's going to have to earn it.